know me and some of you don't, I am Sonia Williams Lewis. I am the founder and CEO of Ascribe Educational Consulting. Let me give you a little bit of background, just of my journey and how I got to this place. I'm a Bay Area native. I call myself an Oakland chick. And literally when I say I'm an Oakland, so close your eyes and put in your mind LL Cool J back in the day when he said around the way girl, that was me. But from the West Coast instead of the East Coast, right? What that means to me is freedom, independence, probably a little bit of adultification because I shouldn't have been doing things that as a child that a child shouldn't be doing, but you had to do in order to survive. I can remember days of riding the 43 or the 40 or the 40B from North Oakland to East Oakland because my parents had shared custody of my sister and I. And then we landed in Sacramento, and I hated it. And the year was 1986, and so it's not the city that it is today. So remember that bus of 40 to 43, it would run like every 5 to 7 minutes. And I got here, and I think it was bus 85, just to go from Burbank High School, where I went to high school, to Florence, Maryland. It would be like every hour and 15 minutes. And I would be like, what kind of city is this? And when I get of age, I'm getting the hell up out of here. And I did. But before I did, I had a pivotal moment in my senior year of high school where my lead counselor, guidance counselor, I don't even know, advisor, Mr. O'Neill, who I was one of only 2 black females, 3 black students in a magnet program at Burbank, Math, Science, and Engineering program. And he said to me, Sonia, where are we going to school? Because I put out some good words for you, and you know, you don't even have to apply, but we got some acceptances at some good places like Berkeley and Stanford. And he said, I'm like, that's nice. But I'm going to Spelman. And he said, Spelman? I said, yes. He said, why would you do that? I said, because there's some history behind that. Then he went on to say that if I made a decision like that with all of the brilliance and possibility of who I could be, I would be practicing reverse racism. So I went home and I told my little advocate, activist mother, Mom, you will not believe what Mr. O'Neill said to me today. And she was livid. So my mother, we call her a quasi Black Panther. She will never admit to you that she went to meetings and that she did work in the community. She will never admit that. At that time in her life, she was very corporate. And so there was a stamp that you put on yourself if you associated yourself with certain organizations. So she will never, but I know that I've seen a beret, I've seen a jacket, and I got pictures. So there's proof.
She has receipts.
Yes. So she goes in and she says, let me tell you something about historically black colleges to Mr. O'Neill. And by the end of that session, I don't think that we ever spoke again in like he literally alienated me in our class. Like we had never had another interaction. Like if he called on somebody, he was intentionally, I can see him looking through me. And so I was like, I got you. I know exactly what this is. You're not doing anything but preparing me for, the real world. So long story short, my mother, when I was probably in the 3rd grade and I could say the word college, told me about my ancestry, about my lineage. And so my great-great-great-grandfather founded Friendship Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, and that's the church that Spelman was founded in. And so I have family members who have gone to Spelman. And my mother missed her opportunity, and she said, if in the world, one of her girls would go to Spelman. And so I had a banner on my wall growing up as a kid, Spelman, that's all I knew. And I didn't want to get into this, what I consider prestigious university, all black women's college in Atlanta, Georgia, on the merit of my family. Because I'm kind of, stubborn and I'm very competitive and I like to do things my way. And so the first round of acceptance letter, I get a letter that says, Sonia, you've been put on a wait list. Now, mind you, I had a 3.93 GPA. I had scored very well on the SAT at that time. And I'm thinking to myself, dang, should I have accepted Berkeley or Stanford? But I held out, and by end of June, school's out, I get another letter in the mail saying, you've been taken off the wait list.
All right.
And so there goes my journey. I started off as a pre-med major because I have family members who suffer with sickle cell. And I wanted to be the scientist that discovered the cure because I had a cousin growing up who died of sickle cell. So that was I thought my life's mission. My sophomore year of college, I said, no, I'm gonna become a lawyer. My dad was in my ear a little bit. He said, you argue so well. You argued money out of me, moving to different cities. You should be a lawyer. But I interned at a law firm in Washington, D.C., and I was like, this is only about money and not about people. And so that was a game changer for me. So, we have epiphanies on the way of our journey. So then I said to myself, okay, well, I can educate. I do well with, speaking. I don't have a problem with that. And I feel like young people are the pulse of everything. So I studied to become a secondary education. I have a bachelor's in history and psychology, a master's in education with an emphasis on curriculum and program development. So literally, I consider myself like a guru of taking any subject and putting it into, actualization, right? And so that led me to being a teacher for 17 and a half years until what thing happens to a lot of Black and brown women in the workplace. They are pushed out because they are either too vocal, too Black, too something. And I kept seeing the gaps for Black and brown children, for poor and foster children, for LGBTQ students. And I said, well, when are we gonna do something different? And my little principal at the time, he said, you know what, I can't fire you from the district, but you can't come back here to work.
Thank you.
2008. And thank God, because I had made, prior to that, so a little secret, those of you who are faith believers, so I had made a deal with God. Give me 15 years and then I'm gonna figure out the next, journey of my journey. That year was year 17 and a half. So I was already overdue for a change, but I was being stubborn. I was being hard-headed because if I had left at year 15, it wouldn't have been the thorn in the side that I'm still, it's still trauma associated with that. I was then diagnosed with depression and anxiety because I was going to fight Sac City Unified School District to my death if they didn't make sure that I was good. And then I took a severance package and, I went on about my business, collected my check, and I started a scribe because I kept getting phone calls. And those phone calls were, can you come and help my school do this? Can you write a program for this? We have a group, we saw that you made this program and it changed the trajectory for this group of students. Can you come and help? And so I became the eyes and ears on school campuses all around this region, which is assessing the climate and culture, right? Because sometimes we don't know what we don't know because we get into those shoes and we just turn on the key and we drive based on the roadmap that's ahead of us. Not based on, are we leaving someone behind? Not based on, are my needs being met? And so what we're going to talk about today, and hopefully you all engage me with some questions that I can be of assistance with, but really and truly, what does it look like to have shared language and value around equity, right? So that's the first thing. The case study that I'm going to use is Robla Unified here in this area. It's an elementary school district. Myself, Daryl Roberts at the Roberts Family Development Center, Dr. Andrea Moore, who's a professor at Sac State, the district, and a couple of other community partners. And they said to themselves, we've already done resilience work with all of our staff. Like, this is mandatory. This is like not, you can opt in. No. They were making it you had to do this. And so once a month, we had the opportunity to meet with 300 plus staff members and walk them through anti-racism, walk them through equity. Now, mind you, this is a little bit after George Floyd, which opened the door, because prior to George Floyd, when I would go into organizations, it would be, can I help you with your assessment of your climate and culture? I couldn't go in and lead with, I am here as an equity specialist. I am here to talk about the courageous conversation around anti-racism, specifically anti-Blackness, right? And then if we get into the weeds of things, colorism, all of the things, the layers and the nuances that come with this topic. So they were like, yeah. And then they found out that I was one of the former chapter leads of Black Lives Matter here in Sacramento. And some people would be in the Zoom rooms, because we were still in Zoom at that time. And they'd be like, yeah, she's responsible for shutting down stuff. And I'd be like, that's me, right? But proudly, because there's a caveat, there's an understanding that we now have as to the why. Because now we all have shared language and value around the necessity for forcing people to pause in moments, to think about why the systems dictate the conditioning of this and how we interact here and here and here, right? And so that's important, right? Because if we drive by anybody in Sacramento, and we have a huge issue here in Sacramento with unhoused folks, and we drive by and we don't see the humanity or inhumanity in that, this is keeping us from this and this and that. And I'm a firm believer of that. And I've been, an outspoken, an old soul, my grandmother would say. She would be like, you just know some things that I don't know how you knew. But she also taught me one important value, that a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So I was always raising my hand saying, can we do this? Because this ain't working over here for me, right? And so I give, everyone permission, even if you didn't think that you needed it. Hey, ask questions. Make sure that somebody might not know what your needs are. And what people don't know, they don't know, right? There are a majority of femme in here, right? Women. I don't want to presume pronouns and things of that nature, but with the presentation of what do we have to say to ourselves when sometimes in some spaces led by primarily white men, cisgender, English speaking, Christian oriented, right? Because those are the privileged groups that our country has shaped and built itself the foundation of. When their needs are met, and they don't consider a room like this, right? And so that's the importance of equity and why we're doing this. So I wanted to just share a couple of things on how we walked through this project. And I closed some of them because I was trying to get them over to you. I want to just start off with this one here. And this is a presentation that we used, the future we all deserve, right? So imagine for yourself. I say close your eyes and think about a time when you were young, when the first person or thing or event told you that your voice wasn't important. So take a moment and think about that thing. Close your eyes if it's helpful, but go to that place. Imagine what age you were. See if you can visualize yourself. What age, what was happening around you when your voice wasn't important? Now take a deep breath, because for some people it might be traumatic, right? Are there any brave souls who want to share? Go ahead. Tell me your name.
My name is Zara Carter Alvarado, she, her, ella. My first memory of that would have to be, I was about 6 years old in kindergarten, and I was here in Sacramento attending Lion Elementary. And if anybody went, I was living here about, I'll give my age, about 50 years ago. It was a very different type of Sacramento.
Very.
And I was the only black child in the class, and I'll never forget my teacher. I was asking questions, and she said, you just can't keep up. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put you over here, and she put a divider between me and sat me with my back turned to the rest of the class. So I had to face the wall with the divider. So I went home and cried to my mom, and she came up there and she fought for me, pulled me out and put me in Prairie Elementary, but it's still a core, like that first time that I experienced that, and I was so young that it's like my first time even associating school, like what school was. And school was hard for me after that, honestly.
Heart, I give heart to you, because unfortunately, young black children experience those kind of traumas, psychological unsafety at very, very young ages, unfortunately. where our counterparts oftentimes are allowed to be free, to express, to curate, and create. And so hearts to you. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for sharing.
Yes.
A little confidence. My name's Irene. Unfortunately, I can't pinpoint an exact age, but my first exposure to that was actually within my family. I had women in my family, grandmother and mother, constantly reiterating to me the messaging was, stay in your lane, don't speak up. You know, that was a constant until only recently am I finding my voice. So I'm here with all of you guys, but yeah, sadly for me it was in my own family.
Yeah. It happens, you know, sometimes culturally, especially if you move from one country to another, there's not that shift, right? One more, anyone else? Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi everyone, Nia Moorweathers, pronouns she, her, hers. I think I was maybe about 4 or 5. I got lost in a grocery store, and a white woman found me in the grocery store, and she's, you know, I told her, I remember saying to this woman, like, my father is white, so help me find him. And she was like, oh, that can't be true. And she took me to every single person of male identification of color in the store, as I persistently told her, this is not my father, I've already told you. And my father finally gets on the loudspeaker of the store and he says, Nia, come to the front. And I'm like, oh, that's my dad. I run to the front of the store, and she pulls me away from him, and she's like, I'm gonna call the police, like, you're trying to steal this child. And my dad had to pull a photo of my mother out of his wallet to be like, this is my daughter, please let go of my child.
Wow. Testament, right? And then those are the things that we carry with us, because they do become baggage. They become part of our epigenetics. They become part of the way our birth and circumstance and the way that we interact with different people in the world. And I don't know if any of you, you know, especially of all of us, have even thought back and said, how can I heal that child, right? What would I have done differently? That's an alarm. What would I have done differently? What would I have needed in that moment? And unfortunately, the people who sometimes perpetuate and perpetrate these traumas on us, sometimes they just don't know, you know? And so when I do anti-racism work, really and truly, I'm going in with the lens of, this is not about blame and shame. Because we've all been conditioned to play our role. We've all been conditioned, especially when we're talking about diverse rooms like this, to be pitted against each other, right? Oppression Olympics is real. It's very real. My situation is worse than your situation. No, well, we went through this for more years. It's very real. I hear the debate currently that we're living in globally with respects to what's happening in Israel compared to what's happening in Ukraine compared to what's happening in Africa, right? And so we have very civil unrest going on all over the globe, but what we hear oftentimes in American or Western society is that the stories are the closer to whiteness, the more important, right? And so we have to question that. And so with Robla, what we were able to do was bring those outside partners, bring in experts like myself, Dr. Moore from an academia perspective, right? And create a model that allowed for them to just create some restoration around anti-racism. Like, they knew that they wanted staff diversity, and they knew that representation mattered. They just didn't know how to actualize it, right? So I can remember Daryl Roberts midway through our session, the year, and he said, well, superintendent, go with me on a trip down to New Orleans and you can see 3 historically Black colleges and you can recruit there. And I was like, on surface, that's excellent. But what are the dangling carrots are you gonna give to those college students that are going to want them to come to California, which even though it's the 4th largest economy in the world, is still an extremely expensive place to live, And coming out of college, what kind of dangling carriage can you get to convince someone to come here, right? So we flush those kind of things out with organizations. When we're talking about ethnic studies and implementing culturally responsive, not just curriculum, but policy. Like, but not limited to, when an incident like George Floyd happens, or when an incident like Stephon Clark happens, does your organization take a pause to check the temperature of their team, right? And then, because I believe that there's 3 prongs for every organization: your team, the people who work for you and produce, your community, the people that you serve, and your global footprint. Because there are some social justice issues happening wherever you are, and if you are oblivious to them, that means you're oblivious to the people that you serve and to the people who work for you. And so there's some shared language that we can come up with around how do we implement things that are culturally responsive. This was a school model, so one of the things that was important was how do we grade our babies in a more equitable manner. But similarly, in any organization, because I say every organization, regardless of industry, size, whatever, nonprofit, for-profit, every organization needs to assess where they are when it comes to equity. And your people who serve the people deserve to have someone that's not in the group to be eyes and ears. And that's grading, that's assessing where we are and where we can make change and make things better. And then how do we, again, a school model, but student discipline and dismantling discriminatory policies and practices. Very similar, I don't care if it doesn't have to be a school. This model fits in any organization. How are we keeping people on the trajectory of success within our organization, right? Instead of letting them go. Do you have a model that goes from you're hired to you're promoted to you are mentored, and then to my favorite, to you are sponsored, right? Because sponsorship and mentorship are totally different, and I need everyone in here to understand the power of sponsorship. Mentorship is, tell me your name. Dua, you might have some questions for me, and I want to learn from you, and as a senior exec here, I want to make sure that you're successful here. Let's meet at least once a month and have conversations. Mentorship. Dua, there's a job opening that I think that you would be excellent for, and I want to put your name in the bag, and I want to know all of the skills. What are your dreams being with this organization? So that when I'm in that next board meeting with the people who are making the decisions, I'll be like, we got somebody here that already fits the criteria for that job. I'm putting my name on the line for someone else. I'm stepping outside of who I am and what I built for myself and saying someone else needs to be able to go up the ranks in an organization. And we can do that for each other. And we often miss that opportunity as we are working with folks. Another, like I said, the part in here that sometimes people miss when we're talking about anti-racism and restoration for adults is that we don't give people enough time just to even think about where they are in those moments. Because again, birth and circumstance is one thing. We can be oblivious to things when we go home, when we get behind our closed doors and we lock the door and we can tone the whole world out with whatever is going on in the world. But if my neighbor sitting next to me in the cubicle next to me is going home to a totally different situation, and I don't have empathy, compassion, care for, all I know is this person shows up, we're a little bit different, but they show up with a smile on their face and they're either doing one of two things. They might be code switching or they might be masking. And those two are very different things. So these are some of the words that we are using, shared language, shared values. How do we identify those things? Because code switching is, I'm just showing up and I know that there's a way to be professional. Or in this setting, or as my children say, Mom must be talking to somebody professional. We ain't listening to Drake turning it up right now, right? That's what they tell me. Oh, she must be talking to somebody for business. And then they mock me in the background. But how can we help people be authentic and unapologetic when they show up in spaces, right? Masking is a whole nother level. Masking is saying, I'm accepting that this is what it is, and I'm gonna shove it all the pain, all the trauma, all the triggers, all the things that are harmful to me. I'm gonna shove it down, I'm gonna put this mask on, I'm gonna do my job. And I'm never gonna be authentic. It is the spook who sat behind the door, if you're not familiar with that book, right? It is the person on the inside who sees all of the things, but can't speak up about all of the things, right? Very different from code switching. Code switch is like that entry level to masking, but a person who's accepted it really and truly is not effectively going to make change. And it's hard to get out of the mentality that I'm sabotaging my own, mental health or my own psychological safety because I'm accepting of. So this was one of the presentations that we used here, like reflecting and developing critical self-awareness. What does that look like? Because in a school setting, it is, they are always talking about social emotional health of the children and things of that nature. Adults need to be aware of their social emotional health. I think it's more important for adults to know so that they can model, like this is what it looks like, right? Because if we don't know and we just are expecting, Tua, I need you to act like this. Why aren't you doing that, Tua? Tua, go sit over here. Tua, I need you to leave my classroom too. Right? We have to check why we would be ostracizing, alienating, silencing, othering, erasing shared language. Because when we understand that I've ostracized a person or within an organization, how does that impact the bottom line? That person is typically gonna come to work every day. They ain't gonna say nothing to nobody. They are not gonna forge professional relationships, personal ones, right? You will never know what there's going on in their home environment. And so if something were to happen to them, you couldn't even help them if you wanted to. There's no lifeline. There's just none. So safety in the workplace means that we have courageous conversations around what it means to build belonging. And I don't care if you are a male-female other. I don't care if you are older or younger. I don't care if you come from suburbs, urban, rural. I don't care those things. Humanity should matter over all of those things. And here's the thing that some people, maybe I'm an alien, but hopefully some people, kind of sort of get what I'm saying when I say this. If what I have, if looking at the needs of someone else doesn't take away from what I have, why won't I work on the behalf of people who don't have what I at least have? Does that make a lot of sense? So if I have $1 million and X person over here only got $1,000, and I can go and I wish I had $1 million. Now that I'm thinking about it. But if I had, you know what I mean? So if I'm only thinking about how I can keep my $1 million, but what they're doing with $1,000 isn't taking away from my $1 million, why won't I help them to the best of my ability, get more than 1,000? Maybe they won't get 1 million, but why can't it be 2 millionaires standing next to each other? Right? That's that scarcity versus abundance. And I had that screen up, and I'm gonna pull it up. And please don't judge me, because you're gonna see all of the windows that are open. Just don't judge me. Maybe, yep. So we do a lot of talking about two mindsets, scarcity versus abundance. And I don't understand scarcity. We live in the richest nation in the world. We live in California. How about that? The fourth largest economy in the world. So that means that however many nations are in this world of ours, we're number 4 in California alone. Why are we working from a scarcity? Like there's no zero sum, there's no depletion. We should not have unhoused folks on the city of Sacramento. I'm just saying. And the unfairness of that. Right? Versus what we have from an abundance mindset when we're talking about there's an exponential way of reaching the goals if we put our heads together and we get to the root of what the problem is. And I'm just a firm believer because maybe it's my social activism, maybe it was me sitting in our home and my mother had books about and things that she would always try to drill into my head. I don't know, but I watched things as a child. So remember the question that I asked earlier, when was the first time someone silenced your voice? For me, I was in the 2nd grade. Her name was Miss Billy. I was in advanced 2nd and 3rd grade mixed class. I was the only black kid in that class. And so the previous school year, one of my big cousins, he had special needs. He was like a big kid, but he was a humongous giant of a person. Like 6'4", 250 pounds, just gorgeous dark chocolate of a man. And he had this burly voice, but it was so gentle and kind. And I used to remember as a kid having the best piggyback rides and swings. I mean, just grab my arms, Cousin Carl, and swing me around. The best time. We growing up in California, growing up in the Bay Area, no snow, but we made leaf angels in the grass. Not snow angels, but leaf angels. And we would play video games when Atari first came out with Cousin Carl. And when I was probably around 6, right before this 2nd grade school year, he had a mental break. He had gone outside in his underwear thinking that he was just taking the garbage out. And a neighbor called the police and said there's men walking around the neighborhood with just his underwear on. Now everybody on this block knew that Carl was special needs. My aunt, she always made sure that if somebody new neighbor moved in and didn't, make the introductions, I guess, or didn't believe the introduction was the introduction, let's say that, because the introduction did happen. And police showed up. And because he was not even verbally cognitive to even say, I'm just taking out the trash, and I got locked out. And so they told him to put your hands up, and he turned to go into the door, to open the door, to show them, see, the door is locked. And unfortunately, he was shot right on his mother's porch in the back. And so I go to my aunt's house soon thereafter, maybe about a month, and I'm like, where's Carl? Where's Cousin Carl? And we as younger kids couldn't just call him Carl, because in my family and a lot of black families, if there's this big age gap, you always had like a surname, a cousin or aunt, aunt or uncle, even though they really were your cousin, which is supposed to be your contemporary. He was that much older than me. And so, where's Cousin Carl? No one wanted to tell us kids. And I didn't find out until like much later what had happened. Overhearing a conversation with my parents, my mom being the activist behind the scene that she was, and my father saying, well, they killed him and there's nothing we can do about it. And she was like, it is things we can do about it. We can do this, we pay tax. She's going into the whole thing. And so I overheard this conversation at age 7. So at age 7, I went to school one day, and I don't know what it was, what we were learning about the words in the Pledge of Allegiance. And I said to myself at age 7, I'm gonna sit my little butt right here and I ain't getting up. And so your story was age 6. Your story was age 4. Where did she go? Hers was young too, right? I was 7. And I said to Miss Abilu as she kept me in for recess, because everybody gets up back in the 70s, you stand up by your desk, you put your hand on your heart, and you face the flag and you start with the Pledge of Allegiance, right? And so I sat in my seat with my arms crossed. I had just heard the night before what had happened to Carl. And so she said, Miss Williams, you will stay in at recess and write on the chalkboard that the Pledge of Allegiance is the American way. And she left me in the classroom all by myself and gave me a piece of chalk. And I practiced my cursive of my name. And she was fuming, but she couldn't be fuming because all the other kids was there. They would be witnesses, right? This went on for about a month. And I was unrelenting. And she was unrelenting. And I said, let's see who's going to be more unrelenting. I'm not giving in. I was afraid to go home and tell my parents, and she was afraid to go and tell the principal. I wonder why. Long story short, principal comes in to do a teacher review and wanted to set up this appointment, and Miss Boogie wasn't in her classroom, but Miss Williams was. Sonia, why you in here on your lunch break? Oh, well, Miss Boogie been taking away my recesses and my lunchtime for months. I told it all, right? But I knew in telling her that also meant that I spilled the beans and it would get home to mama. My mother's only rule about school was, you better not have me come up there. I promise you, it's not gonna be good for you when you get home. And I said, okay, that's why I didn't tell. So, voice, silence, didn't feel the confidence of being able to go and tell at home, but because of what my home life was, confident enough to look Miss Billieu. I can remember her little bun and everything when she would stick a pencil in it, and her glasses, her little red glasses. She had a little whistle around her neck. I can remember standing up to Miss Billieu. And Miss Reno, who was my principal, she was more hippie and younger, and she was like, well, we're gonna figure out what's going on. Can you explain to me why you don't want to say the Pledge of Allegiance? And I said, you tell me if you went home to my neighborhood, is there liberty and justice for all? I was 7. And my grandmother used to say she's been here before. I know what that meant. I just was like, ain't no liberty and justice in my neighborhood. I knew that for sure at age 7. So for young Black children, they learn at a faster rate, right from wrong, differences between races. They just have to. It's like you're thrown into the water and you say swim or you sink, and they're gonna try to swim. So understanding this mentality, this mindset is extremely important to the work that we do. Let's see if I can close this out and bring up another one. Close for me. Minimize. And there we go. All right. Again, don't judge. Don't judge. Summary. You see it? Did you see it? Yes, thank you. See those young eyes, I tell you. So we created this resilience project. And this was specifically for Robla School District, but again, this is how we go into organizations. I do an assessment. This is a discovery of where you feel like there can be some improvements to be made within your organization, and then we create a plan. But for Robla, we wanted to just journey through 2 years of if we were to do something different, focusing on equity, cultural responsiveness, combined with anti-racism. And it was phenomenal. They might not need us in a full capacity every month now, and we did this project for 3.5 years with them. Then we were asked, can you come to conferences, educational conferences, here in California and around the country, because they want to see the model and how it works, right? But again, this resilience, the idea of it coupled with social justice, anti-racism, cultural responsiveness, can be adapted to any industry, any size organization, regardless of where they are in the world for that matter. So this is kind of was like our schedule, how we approach things. We did like a down and dirty of the history of race, which was interesting. You know, sometimes there were very quiet moments. Mm-hmm. Silence is 2 things. Silence can be someone processing and change is gonna come, or someone processing and feeling like it's their fault and you're shaming me and I want out of this. Mm-hmm. The social proof in doing this kind of work is that I'm able to, because I'm not part of the group, identify who are the allies in the room. Because the allies in the room are vested in that organization. And at the end of the day, I pack my stuff up and I leave. Mm-hmm. Whoever's left behind, it's their responsibility to say, I'm taking ownership Because we all now have some shared language and values around what anti-racism looks like, how it shows up, right? What anti-blackness is and how it shows up. What are the microaggressions? What are all of the things, right? Are you gaslighting me? All getting the verbiage. A lot of people just don't have the verbiage. I thank the young people today, I really and truly do, because young people are telling me things about myself that I'll be like, at 52, I'm like, you want me to, okay, let's have a conversation about that. But a lot of people my age and older will be like, you don't know what you're talking about. I didn't live. I'm gonna die this way. That's what racism and truly is. And the hope is, I can remember being in high school and Oprah said on her show, when maybe racism will, she had an older white man gentleman on her show, and she said, maybe racism will die with you and not your grandchildren. And I never forget that, because we unconsciously pass things down. But they also pass things up. And so in this give and take, hopefully it's more washing away than it is of the growth. I want to stop there and open it up for any questions, because what was important, like I said, about this project is that Robla decided that they couldn't do it alone. They also made the decision that they were not going to bring someone in from the outside of this community who did not know their community to do that work. So I urge anyone who's doing this work, wherever it is, whatever capacity, and people are having these kind of conversations, urge them to bring in local people. I don't want to also say that anyone can do this work. The skill and the knowledge base, anyone can master. But really and truly, it's the voices of those who've experienced the microaggressions, who experienced the racism, who experienced the patriarchy, who experienced the margins of the margins. Like, find out what that marginalized group is, then dissect that group and find who's on the margins of the margins. Because I promise you, even in that marginalized group, if you got all black women, put them into a circle, we then are going to look at presentation. Because this is what the world does to us, right? And the presentation is going to be from dark to light, right? And then that presentation is also going to include other things that they present, right? Beauty standards of beauty. How articulate are they? Do you have a college degree? So even though I'm in a demographic of black women, the one strike against me is that I'm a darker skinned black woman, but I'm college educated, I'm married, I have other things that someone else might say, oh, but Sonia, she's not, she's good. Because that's the way I've been treated. I've been told literally, you're a good one of them. Yeah. So we have to breathe through these moments, but we also have to recognize that this is what it is. And so in order to create more equitable, humane organizations where belonging matters, here's what belonging does at the end of the day. It is going to force a person to come to work every day and be glad that they are coming to work for you every day. They're looking at their co-workers and co-conspirators in the journey like, are we gonna mess it? Okay, code switch. We're gonna fuck some shit up. What are we going to accomplish that's going to be radical in the world? Right? However you approach that. However, so in an organization where folks feel comfortable and they feel like they belong, they wouldn't have a problem with walking in and be like, today I feel like my hood self. That around the way chick, and we're gonna fuck some shit up today.
That's right.
And then there are other days where I might come in and I just want to be, but no one should be able to challenge and push back to how I show up. But that's part of belonging. And then people who feel like they belong, they're going to go and do over and above. And if they are doing over and above, and if everybody else is doing over and above, it increases productivity. And what is it? Productivity increase revenue and all the things and who we serve and can we all get a raise? Because remember, the millionaire compared to the person who has $1,000. Now I need to have an equitable living wage. Any questions? Any questions? Yes.
I'm sorry, can I get your name and your?
Yes, and let me, I'm gonna have to find something. Sonia Williams Lewis. Oh, yeah, it is. I know, but it's so small. Let me pull up something real quick. Right? Let's see if this helps me. No, it doesn't. I know it's over there.
There's workshop area, series workshop area.
There we go, I think. There we go.
Oh, look at the photo.
I remember who that So yes, here, Ascribe Educational Consulting can be found at ascribesuccess.com. Our email is there, phone number. But yeah, just a little bit. I took that story of my 7-year-old self and I wrote a book year before last. And I put it in a book. And so I need to re-up on my copies because I have like 7 copies to my name left. But that's the book. It's called Monsters and Aliens, the voice you wish they heard. Because I wish that Miss Billy would have said why. That's it. If I would have been able to explain why, I might have for the rest of that school year gotten up and said Pledge of Allegiance like everybody else. But she didn't ask. And so now I don't say the Pledge of Allegiance still to this day. But yeah, that's baby Sonia, probably about 2. I was like Forrest Gump, if you've ever seen that movie. I was born with dislocated hips. So I wore leg braces from my hips to my ankles till about age 3. And until I outgrew them, and they had to break my hips to turn my legs out. And the doctor said that she won't have children. She won't be able to. She probably will, walk on a cane and just not be mobile. And I'm the proud mother of 6 beautiful black boys, all natural births, which on hips is really 6 boys. Tell me.
That's a look at the
I might be the queen of my castle, but it's a lot of testosterone sometimes. I just have to run away. Yes. I ran track, I played basketball, I was a cheerleader, I did African, everything that the doctor said that I couldn't do, I was like, Mama, sign me up for that.
Yeah.
And she was like, okay.
Doctors only know so much.
Only so much. Right? But this is the story of 7-year-old Sonia. And yeah. Any other questions? Y'all have been amazing. I hope it was good. I hope there were some tidbits in there.
Thank you. True honor to have you speak with us.
Thank you. We're only on time. Oh, we went.
Sonia, could I ask you a question? In
Yes.
all of your work, what would you say is when somebody's trying to apply this work or do this, like this model, what was the biggest resistance, and what was it about it that stumped you? And like, how did you move through it?
So sometimes, I don't want to say sometimes, I want to say in every group that I've ever worked with, there is an unassuming, very nice, mid to late 30s, early 40s, white man who seems very hip and down with the shit, who will just sit there with their arms folded just like this through all my sessions. And when I try to engage, it stumps me. Because, but then how I try to overcome that is elicit the allies in the room. Because I'm gonna leave eventually. And that person's not gonna leave, right? And so how does the group bring everyone along? Everybody might not change. There are groups that I've worked with, they say, I'm not doing this. Y'all can do that, but I'm not doing this. And then they leave because there's not that alignment piece. But there are some who are going to be the thorn in the side and stay until you make them leave. But it still creates a culture and a climate that sometimes is unwelcoming. And I say there are people within that space who is cool with that person. Y'all need to figure out what that looks like. And then how do we hold each other accountable to this work is what I leave people behind with. I had a group, I won't name names. I had a group, their vice principal was like, he was that guy. I would see him writing referrals. He would always be doing paperwork. And so one session we were talking about, I came in on this day, it was right before Thanksgiving, so it had to be November. And it was right before Thanksgiving, and I said, I'm giving out a t-shirt and a book to whoever can answer this question. Who in the room knows what pot liquor is? Who knows what pot liquor is? What pot liquor?
The green, the fucking green.
And then take away coals and
The medicine, all the stuff. So I said, I was trying to say that Thanksgiving is not for everyone, and a lot of traditionally for Black families, it's the only day that we get off, that we can get together as a family. So it's not a matter of celebrating the things that happen in this country and that we actually stole from the native indigenous people. That's not why we get together. You might be getting together for a different reason. So I asked the question about pot liquor, and it was their culinary teacher was an older white guy. He was like, I'm from New Orleans, baby. I loves the pot liquor. And he said that in front of his colleagues in his little chef shirt. And I said, I like this guy. I asked him, I pulled him aside because he was like, it's some issues. And I don't think that people who look like me around here care to solve these issues. I said, I need your help. I said, I need you to have a conversation with y'all's vice person. So that's how I was able to, I had to identify the allies. And this wasn't like that for right after that. It was a few, because he was invested. I saw that he was invested. Because if you're going to get up in the room full with your colleagues and say, I like the pot liquor, baby, I'm from New Orleans. I mean, the whole, like, I'm imitating, because I ain't from New Orleans, I'm from Oakland, I'm just an Oakland chick. I don't know, but, that's what it sounds like to me. I'm from New Orleans. Do that in front of your colleagues. He felt unapologetic. Right. He didn't have to mask. He didn't have to code switch, but he's a white man. And after a few more sessions, I need you to do me a favor. Have a conversation with your vice principal. Tell him about what your students need, because in his culinary class, they were mostly Black and brown. Tell him when they don't get to come to school for stupid stuff like not having a pencil because you told them, kick them out of class for not having a pencil.
Right.
Like I use a graphic in when I'm working with schools. One has a school where all of the supplies and things right when you walk in the school door, they're right there. So if you don't have it, you just grab what you need and you go. And the other school, the kid is walking through metal detectors and the security are there to search every part of you and all that kind of stuff. And it tells the story of the caption of how Billy got to school and how Jose got to school. And Billy's getting to school was mom woke him up, she fixed breakfast, they drove and Bob and blah, blah, blah. Have a nice day, Billy. Jose, the night before, there was noise, he didn't get a lot of sleep, he woke up and Jose is a straight A student, mind you, but as he was running to the bus stop, his pen dropped out of his hand because he had his notebook out because he was studying, but he had to catch that bus, which was an hour drive. He gets there, he goes to the metal detector, and he sits down, and the teacher says, take out your pens, we're about to have a pop quiz. He raises his hand, I don't have a pen, my pen dropped on the way, and she sent him out of classroom. And then he ended up getting detention, which meant that he missed his bus to get home, and he had to walk a long way to get, long story short, get a kids the resources.
Wow.
Like that.
I have a question,
Yes.
if you don't mind. You were talking a little bit earlier in your presentation about social emotional learning and awareness for adults who are in the classroom. I know how deeply that's tied to mental health for our children, especially in schools. So I'm wondering, what has been a time where you've kind of had to kind of step back and be like, oh, I need to do a little bit of a self-awareness moment, a self-awareness check-in for myself, because maybe I'm not with the shit at this particular moment.
I know for certain that my last teaching position, I was getting to having more and more of those moments. And when I was starting to have those moments, it was, what is this and what's going on? To even 2008, 2007, we knew social media, but we weren't really doing the full gamut of stuff that we know now. So I didn't have even the language to identify what was going on. But I knew something was. And eventually I had a colleague pull me aside and was like, you're not your normal self. I said, please explain. And she did, and it was a colleague that I trusted. And she was an older white lady who just so happened to be one of my high school teachers. And I was her boss. And she was like, I've known you most of your life. You're not okay. This is what she gave me the white woman prescription, is what I call it. She said, go to your doctor and tell your doctor X, Y, and Z. My doctor put me off work for 2 weeks to get me to. I had no. This is all you got to do? What? And I can think back on other times when I was feeling that way. I started thinking to myself, I've experienced that before. And this is all I had to do? And so I called up my old teacher. I call her by her last name because I'm just, Miss Richardson, why didn't you tell me this before? We've been working together for like 10 years. But that gave me permission. Had I not had somebody else who noticed it, I might not have, and I might have got a break. We just recently had a young lady released from Sacramento County Jail because she was arrested for supposedly having a mental health crisis, which police we know are not educated enough, skilled enough, trained enough to identify whether it is or it isn't. And so I take deep breaths because when I heard the story, I was like, that could have been me. So the next group is waiting to come in.